to me is that there's been a lot of nurses, but you really connected with the people, and you know their names, and they know you, and they're happy to see you. And you know, I mean, of course, other people have that experience, but for me, that was like the greatest compliment to know that I was being present, and when I left, that hopefully, you know, memory would be there.
Sometimes volunteers become ambassadors, so to say, because when they come back from places where they've gone to volunteer, they feel that they really want to make a difference, because they worked in places where there are no labs, and as Laura said, you know, you have to really work with the very basic things that you find there. So there's one volunteer I was told about who actually came back and mobilized resources to try and fundraise for building a lab in Zambia, I think Chibombo district. And what he does now is he goes back and forth from time to time, makes sure it's you know, at least he's the ambassador for that particular region. So that's one way, just one way.
I hope I left things behind. I hope that the work that I did with the folks that I did work with was something that they did value, because when I was working with them, they said that they would. But I actually very much, to your point, believe very strongly in trying to remain involved with the folks that you work very closely with. Nowadays with emails and Skype and text messaging, it's actually very easy to do that. And so I did actually go back and visit the WaterAid office again after I left, which not everybody has the opportunity to go back to Africa, I understand that, but even just you know, keeping in touch, because you can still help remotely. Obviously, it's easier though in the case where you're talking like from a business perspective versus actually, you know, hands-on working with folks and providing medical services. But did a lot of things, even like introducing the use of Outlook calendar. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the workplace. Somebody had mentioned before, one of the frustrating parts when you go into some countries is you're very eager to work and do a lot of things, and you have a lot of ideas, and it becomes frustrating because things just move at a slower pace. So just introducing a few little tactics and ways at which there could be more efficiency in the offices. I hope that they're still using these things. Email policies, HR policies. My mom and I built a bathroom in an elementary school with a village in Western Ghana. I hope they're still using that. So, I mean, there's different ways that you can lead them things. But the point of saying all this is that I think it's really important to try and stay in touch with those that you do work with. Obviously not everybody, but some of the people. They really see value in that, because there's a lot of volunteers that go in and out of these countries and they never show their face or their name back up again. So I think they really appreciate that.
Do you have any particular experience that you know of, any of the projects that you helped get microfunding for, and are they still going? Are they sustainable?
So my microfinance research was more an educational, it was kind of more personal for me, because I just wanted to learn more about microfinance practices. So when I was in Tanzania and doing that research, I did meet with a number of women in different villages. I never, you know, provided any small loans or anything like that. I never would hand over money, nothing like that. It was more educational for me. When I went back to Tanzania on another volunteer, it was a graduate internship that some folks may want to be aware of. The U.S. government, through the State Department, offers a number of graduate internships overseas. That's a great way to get some experience. But while I was over there, I also did some more kind of market research. There was a large amount of money that the U.S. government had to invest in solar power projects, and so I did some research and made some recommendations as to how they can partner with MFIs to provide solar power to a western area of Tanzania. So it's a government thing. I have no idea. I can't really ask them if they used, you know, my strategies, but I hope that they did.
I wanted to just say that one of the things that I love about CMMB as an organization is how supportive they are of the volunteers in the field, and how they tell you from day one, if you see a need, just run with it, go with it. Assess the community and then do what you can to leave something behind. And I was really fortunate when I was down working in Peru to have a chance to do a little bit of public health work. And so in my personal case, I did some research and a survey of a community with disabilities living in an area of extreme poverty, and used the data to create a community-based rehabilitation project for this population. And so it basically started when I left. The research part took longer than I anticipated. But fortunately, the project is running and going strong and continuing to grow. And I was actually down there last month just for a short-term trip and was able to see the progress that he made, which was really, really cool to see. That something had remained despite the fact that the short-term volunteers and the long-term volunteers and projects. So I think everybody throws the word sustainability around and how they want everything to be sustainable. And I think one of the keys with this project is that it's completely based around agents in the community, people who live in the community already, who are kind of those natural-born leaders who took this project and made it their own. So instead of CMMB's volunteers saying, we're going to start this and we're going to show you how it's run, we just kind of gave them a few tools and empowered them to design and run their own project, which I think is one of the huge positives about this organization.
Just one last comment. I think part of leaving something that's sustainable is it's doing a needs assessment and understanding what is it that the community needs. What do they want you to need? Because what we may view as them needing or wanting is not necessarily what they really or actually want or need. So I think if you talk to people, you'll really be able to assess, okay, what is it that they want from me? What do they want me to help them with? A perfect example was at one of the hospitals I worked at, somebody donated a CT scanner. It was great, except there was no electricity in the hospital. And the manual was in Japanese. I think they would have benefited more from a water storage tank. But again, it's just understanding what are the needs of the community. Let them tell you what they want you to do.
Christy, do you mind? I teach. I was slightly caught up in the pre-tornado issue, so I was a bit late. So I didn't get to say what I do here. I direct the undergraduate programs and the academic director of graduate programs as well. So I do a lot of teaching. Our graduates are all mid-career professionals, but undergraduates, it's very interesting teaching humanitarian assistance, development of global health, which are the subjects I teach. Because you're addressing topics to a group of students, many of whom are here this evening, who are very motivated to go and do something. There's this barrier of how do you get out in the world and start doing and start really learning. And it always seems like the barrier is you need to have some experience in the field, but in order to get experience in the field, you have to be a catch-22. So I was just wondering what your various experiences were about how you got into it, how you made the leap from being an undergraduate studying to actually practicing medicine and doing it. Do you think it's essential to kind of get a core skill like this? And if not, what other things might be? Addresses some question.
Well, you don't have to have a medical background. You can always teach. There's always lots of children, and you can go and teach in one of their schools. They're always short of teachers. You know, we get all these kids and make sure they go to school, and we'd say, Tabisa, you have to go to school, and this one, and that one. And they'd all go there, and like, well, what'd you do at school today? And like, oh, nothing, the teacher didn't come. So there's always something to do as far as go and teach English or mathematics or
I think one of the biggest hesitancies I had as I was starting with CMMB was I was an entry-level physical therapist. I had just graduated, and I wasn't sure if I had the clinical experience necessary to go and run into a culture without a mentor. But I really think at the same time you have a fresh outlook on things, and you also are at a good time in your life when you maybe logistically it's a good time for you to travel, and it's a good time for you to go abroad. Maybe you're less tied down. So if lack of experience is holding anyone back out there from doing something like this, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider that and realize that maybe that isn't the most important piece of going abroad.
There's also short-term volunteer opportunities. Many of you may not be able to dedicate 6 months to a year of your life, and perhaps you're frightened to, to leave kind of your life here to go overseas. It's no easy task, and I don't think everybody can do it. But if you're here tonight, you're probably already motivated, which is great. So perhaps you can look into short-term opportunities like Global Aware. That's an organization that I used for 2 volunteer trips, and they're very affordable. They're not luxurious by any way, shape, or form. So in many ways, you get to experience what it's like being a volunteer living in the villages or the cities or whatever. And there's lots of different types of volunteer projects, and they're looking for lots of different skills. In both cases that I went over to volunteer, both were really based on manual labor, but at the same time, they were very educational for me, and they also allowed me to kind of understand some of the needs in the small communities I was working in, and to go beyond what was expected of me to give back, whether it be teaching in the orphanage or working with some of the women in the villages. There's like I said earlier, you get over there, and there's probably a lot more that you can provide in ways that you can help. You might not realize that here, but even a short-term opportunity may help you to understand what it's like and whether or not you want to take it long-term.
I was just going to add that for the undergraduates, I wish I was your age again. I'm not much older than you, but I wish I was your age. Because now is a great time for you guys to do something. I'm going to assume the majority of you are probably not married, you don't have children, and you have a house mortgage that you need to worry about. You don't have a business or a job that you're necessarily tied into professionally that you don't want to break those ties. I mean, now's the time where it's really easy to pick up and go for a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year, whatever it is that you decide. And the important thing to remember is that actually the people that I've seen do the best work abroad weren't doctors. Many weren't even nurses. They're people that come in and build trenches and build latrines and help open roads. They're engineers. They're really I think people here, they assume that in order to do good, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a nurse, you need to be a physical therapist. I think the reality is the majority of people that are there are not doctors, or not nurses, they're not physical therapists, but they're the ones that have the potential to make the biggest impact. Like the Bible says, right, you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, they'll never need you again. And that's what you can contribute at your stage in a developing country.
How specifically can students and other people connect to CMMB and the work that it does in terms of volunteers? Call Richard. Okay, that's one. But from your experience, I mean, how would you want people to connect to the work you did, or some of those things? I've read some of the blogs that you posted. What are other ways?
So, you guys may think I like to speak a lot, but I don't really. CMMB, the best way to start is to go to the website. There's a website called www.cmmb.org. And you can look at the different sections of the website, but specifically there's what's called the Medical Volunteer Program. And under that section, it gives you a list of countries where people work, projects that are going on, links to blogs. And it's an opportunity, it's like Wikipedia. I mean, it's an opportunity to find out what's going on. And then if you email the coordinators, which are actually Richard and Anand. Anand, can you raise your hand, please? That's Anand, don't hide, it's okay. If you email them, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to put you in touch with people that are in the field, like us. Because often they may email us and say, hey, I have a volunteer that's interested in doing something. Is there anything there in that community that's going on? And when you're in the field, you'd be amazed at how many things come up, even for short-term volunteers. So that would be one good website to look at. There's also what's called the Global Service Health Corps, which is relatively new, but that's also an excellent website to look at. The Peace Corps would be another option. MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, would be another good website to look at. There's a website called unjobs.com. I think it's .com and .org. And it basically has a list of United Nations jobs throughout the world. And all of them can range anywhere from a few months to a few years. But those are all great resources to look for, and the majority of those are not looking for positions.
There's also the U.S. government jobs that you mentioned, the UN. I worked for Millennium Challenge Corporation, part of the agency, and they have graduate internships. They're unpaid, you do have to fund them yourselves, but it's a wonderful experience, particularly if you're interested in learning more about working in the public sector. Perhaps you want to be a foreign service officer or something like this, which I was interested, so I did do one of those internships, and it was great. And those are normally just like a summer, so maybe between years or once you graduate. There's a number of different functions that they're looking for, and different departments within like USAID, within the State Department that are looking for folks.
CMMB also has internships, and it's a great way to kind of get your foot in the door locally until you kind of maybe figure out what you want to do. So I also recommend just looking at CMMB's resources, liking them on Facebook, following them on Twitter, get involved with them too.
I'm just going to add one more. There's a great website. It's called the American Academy of Family Physicians. It's www.aafp.org. And if you go to that website, it's from the American Academy of Family Physicians. There's actually a link that says International Volunteer Opportunities. And they must have at least 40 to 60 different opportunities for people to do volunteer work around the world. And so that's actually a great resource because it leads you to other websites. You can always go there as well.
And just to add one more, the Jesuits also have a volunteer program, actually a number of volunteer programs. But one is the JVP, the Jesuit Volunteer Program.
I noticed that the food is back there, so there's probably time for questions and mingling. One other question I'd like to ask as you wrap up. Is there anything that you learned about yourself that you didn't know before you left? And is there anything you learned about the world that you didn't know before you left?
There's one question I didn't quite answer, and I think I'll take this opportunity to answer it. It's kind of related. Living away from my family has helped me to learn a lot about myself, has helped me to appreciate the values that my mother imparted in that. My father died when we were very young, but so being a cradle Catholic and the values that she passed on to us through the support of family and friends has helped me really come to appreciate the identity that I have. But at the same time, volunteering, as I said, brings a certain fulfillment, and it's just there. It's when you give of yourself, you get a lot more back just from being around the people that you serve. And then also the other thing I learned is I have from just being here. I learned recently that New York is actually not a melting pot; it's a cellar core. And we are here to kind of like celebrate our own identities. So as a Zambian, I try to celebrate my own identity, to share a bit of my culture. And right here at Fordham, it just so happens that I've come to realize that I really appreciate the diversity of cultures that is in New York. I happen to be the president of the Fordham International Students Association, and I love it. I love being in New York in terms of the diversity, celebrating diversity. I miss home, but at the same time, there's a different kind of connection with people that comes from just coming together.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I've spoken since I was a little kid. My kindergarten teacher told me to ask too many questions. But the thing that I think I learned, two things I learned about being abroad. One is that the world is a really neat place. Once you get out there, there's just so many interesting things that are going on, and things that we would never necessarily think about when we're here within our own cities. And the second thing that I learned was that despite language barriers, despite cultural differences, despite geographical barriers, that people out there were a lot more similar than we think. We think of a place like Zambia, we think of a place like Gabon, like Equatorial Guinea, and we say, where's that on the map? But when you go there, you realize that the same core values of family, of support, of health, of religious faith, they're kind of universal values. And for me, that was the neatest thing to be in Mass, for example, with a Kenyan individual that's singing in Luo, or praying an Our Father, I mean, those are universal things that no matter where you go, it's the same. For me, that was really interesting.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? We've got time for a few questions. You want to ask the panel some things that we haven't covered yet?
Amber, could you say something about the Regis partnership? And is that applicable to Fordham University or other universities? What does it mean?
Sure. Well, I study physical therapy at Regis University and maintained some contacts with the faculty there following graduation. And basically, we planned a continuing education event down in Peru the year I was down there, and Regis sent down some students and faculty to be involved with that, as well as the public health projects that we were developing down there. So it just it was kind of a snowball effect. It just kind of, one little idea, and it kind of turned into this international trip, and now it's turning into hopefully a clinical site for the physical therapy students that will be going down once to 2 times a year to stay involved with CMMB, with the Peru Ministry of Health, and with one of the local universities there in Trujillo. So it just kind of, snowball landslide was kind of eventually turned into that, and fortunately it's been really, I think, a positive thing for both the Peruvian universities and the Regis University in Denver. Now, I'm not going to lie, I don't know a lot about Fordham University, but I feel like at least the Peruvian culture is very open to partnering with other universities and huge thirst for knowledge, and I definitely could see it becoming something really big and getting a lot of other organizations and universities involved. I think would be a great thing, and other, not just physical therapists, students, but nursing, other disciplines. I think it could really continue to have a bigger snowball effect in the future. Did that answer your question?
Next. Yes, please.
Hi, I know some of you. My name is Heather. I'm from Florida. I just finished my MPH, my MS, and I'm moving to Peru for a year in about a week and a half. One of the things that I've experienced a lot with either friends, family, coworkers, that I have an answer for, but I don't think it's the best one. Why are you choosing to go to a different country? Why aren't you choosing to stay where you were born and helping here versus helping abroad? And so that's something that I may have struggled a little bit to explain fully for them to understand. And so I was going to see if any of you had any advice to talking to people that disagree with what you're doing, I guess.
Well, getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You go to Africa and, I was a minority, there was 4 or 5 white people out of the whole area. So it tests you on so many levels. It's so raw, it's so different. There's a level of support that we have here in America that generally people don't fall between. I mean, there's poverty here, but there's not extreme poverty like there is there, where there literally is no food, no running water. And so there's a huge difference there. It's just raw. You're open to the elements, and it's the highest high you're ever going to have, and the lowest lows. That sounds kind of space or whatever, but it's just, you're so alive while you're there. It's really amazing. And here it seems like everything falls into a smaller spectrum.
I was reading back to the resources as well. There's a lot of people in the United States that are struggling, but there's also so many support services in the United States between governments for the nonprofit organizations. And comparatively, the resources that are available to people that are in much worse shape down in Africa or Peru, or China or India, there's no comparison. And so, there's also lots of people here that are volunteering and doing things because they're not willing or able or strong enough to go overseas. So it's rare to have a person who's willing to go overseas to volunteer their time. And I think you should be really proud and not struggle. You should be really excited because you're going to gain a lot from your experience.
Do either of those match the answer you've been giving?
Pretty much. That's pretty much what I've been saying. But it's just difficult when some people, I've had family members, and I think are mostly just scared for me, and just want me to stay. But
I think you can also tell them that, remind them of how much you're going to get out of the experience and how it's going to make you a better professional in the future, back when you do come back here, I think it will help you tremendously in understanding other cultures that are within our own culture, and just just going outside of your comfort zone.
Another thing you can ask them is just ask them, well, tell me why not. And tell them, you can't tell me any economic reasons why I shouldn't go. And you can't tell me anything that has to do with my comfort. You're going to find that probably 99% of the people tell you it's going to be because you're not making money, because you're not going to have running water, because you're not going to have roads. So what I tell people, I got tired of trying to justify something. I just ask them, well, tell me why I shouldn't do it. But don't mention money, don't mention comfort. Usually they can't come up with an answer.
I like that. Thank you.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, so we have 2 up front here. First.
My name is Jane, NPA graduate lesson management and in college in New York. My question is, how is your relationship with the staff? Because I know there are a lot of misconceptions in volunteer staff and the staff. So how is your relationship with them?
Well, that was very important.
The question was what's the relationship between paid staff and volunteer staff, and is there any problems in that?
There's definitely some. They would say you're here because you want to. You don't have to be. You're a rich white person. So there's a little resentment at times, and just different ways of working. You know what I mean? I get there in the morning, get everything all set up, and I sit in the truck, and it was all packed with the food, the medicine. And then all the other nurses would go and drink tea for an hour. And they're like, Scott, you need to slow down. So it's just kind of absorbing and not understanding the same difficulties that they have, that they're still raising families and working because they have to, and you're there because you want to. I don't know if that answers the question, but there definitely, it is true, there's tension involved.
Yeah, I think for me especially, like, I was in Sudan and I didn't know any Arabic, and there was local cultures and local languages on top of that. So dealing with the staff and trying to get them to understand why you're doing something, I just think it takes patience and being open. And the more time you spend with them, the more open they will be with you, and you start building a relationship with them. It's very easy to work with people if you're being open and they're being open to it.
Thank you. And last question.
I'm Robert, I work at CMB, and I was interested in maybe you say a few words about what the reintegration into U.S. culture was like back after 6 months, a year, 2 years abroad, sort of really immersing yourself into really different environment, and now you're coming back to your family in the U.S. Is that a challenge, or are there observations that you want to share with us?
Everybody get that? Anyone? The question was, after being gone abroad for so long, how do you reintegrate into the culture here, family, with work, with other things?
It was difficult. It was almost more difficult than going. Coming back, you really stepped out for a whole year, and life just goes on, and people aren't that interested in what you did. You know what I mean? There's always people that surprise you and that kept in touch while you're away. Then there's others that completely wrote you off and didn't do anything. You think, oh my God, how come they not write me? I'm here saving the world and no one's paying any attention to me. And then you come back and you just have to kind of step back into where everyone's been going along. And often people are very threatened to think that, here you are living in New York, you have this great life, how could you give it up? And it questions their security, so that was difficult, and just missing events and things like that. It took a good year, 2 years to feel comfortable again.
Other reactions?
Horrible. That was my experience coming back. It was horrible because you come back after 2 years and the first thing people tell you is, aren't you glad to be back in civilization? Aren't you glad to be back in reality? What do you say? One of the last patients I took care of in Kenya, his name is Dominic, or was Dominic, he died now. He was 4 years old and he weighed 9 pounds. Last week I had a patient in clinic, he's 25 years old, weighs 540 pounds. There's no comparison. I think that when you're here, you need to work here. When you're there, you work there. If you try to work here with your mind there, it's very difficult. And you can't be there constantly thinking about what you're missing out here. I'm sure I confused all of you. So it's a very difficult transition, but what's been the best support for me is that I found that after about 20 seconds of speaking, people don't want to hear what you did. They're not interested. One of the first times I came back, they're like, oh my God, what's her name? Snooki had a baby? I didn't know who Snooki was. Snooki's that girl from Jersey Shore, right? You see, I didn't know who she was. I was like, who's Snooki? And they're like, you don't know who Snooki is? But to me, it wasn't important. So the way I found that I could cope with it was surrounding myself with friends and other people, like other fellow volunteers that shared a similar experience that you can sort of decompress with. Because most other people, it's going to be difficult for them to understand, and it's not that they don't want to. It's just they've never lived that experience. So it's difficult for them to engage.
Well, despite your fact, you're saying that people come back and after 20 seconds they don't want to hear what you have to say. I think this group has been very impressed and fascinated, as I have, by the things that you've had to say. And I appreciate all the work that you do, all the work you've done. It sounds like you've integrated this volunteerism, this spirit and humility into your lives here, and I'm impressed by that, and I think everyone here is. So thank you for your doing that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Alex, and thank you to all our panelists tonight. And after we have just a small token of appreciation, I want to get to each of you. So while you're mingling, I'll give that to each of you. But just go with me for a second here. If you're a Fordham student, could you stand up? So I firmly believe that you all represent the next 100 years of healing and hope, not just for CMB, but for all the organizations you're going to serve. So I want to say thank you for taking time to come tonight and bring optimism to the world. And you represent the next 100 years of healing and hope. So thank you. And part of, maybe the most important part of any night like this is conversations and the food that's going to happen afterwards. And so I just wanted to just highlight the volunteers and alumni who are in the room from CMMB, and if they could just stand up and just say the country that they're connected with. Because I'm hoping that some of these Fordham students will connect with you over the next 45 minutes or so and have conversations about countries that might be of mutual interest. So if you're a CMMB volunteer or alumni, you could just stand up and shout out the country that you're connected with. So maybe start over here.
South Africa.
Maybe first name and country you're going to.
Nikki and South Africa.
All right.
Laura, Peru. Christina, Peru. Jenny, Honduras. Mary, I'm not in a place. Patricia.
I just came back from Honduras in March.
Carol, Uganda.
Emily, Ecuador.
Krista, South Africa. Heather, Peru.
Jim, Malawi, and Cambodia, and Haiti.
Amy, Philippines.
Alan, Dominican Republic.
Tony, Kenya, and Haiti, Korea.
Laura, Honduras. Michaela, Honduras.
Jim, Ecuador.
Great, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We be of your IT.
Great, thank you. There are a couple I just want to make one other question, answer one other question. One of the questions was, how can Fordham students get involved? And certainly internships and connection to people who are long-term in the field, when you might take a summer and connect with them, might be a possibility. But certainly, and I think somebody mentioned it, most volunteers have a blog, so certainly you could follow the blog of some of these volunteers and learn about what they're doing. And you can promote their blog, and certainly connect with Facebook on Twitter and also Facebook. And also Fordham has a unique internship program that we've had some great interns serve in our office